Okay, Zok the Helig Gemara right at the top of Daf Chav Daled Amar Aleph, which is today's Daf. Kama Haya Gavaya, how high was it from the horizon? So one of the questions that they asked Adam was how high off the horizon was the moon, and Ein Hayunot, in which direction was it pointing? So Zok the Gemara. Tana Chada, we have one brayso that says Litzvayna, if it was to the north, Dvarav Kayam, then he's building. But the Raima, if it's to the south, Loy Amar Klum, then it's not a good testimony. But Tanya Frektimar Ibcha, we actually learned a brayso that says exactly the opposite. The Raima, Dvarav Kayam, and Litzvayna Loy Amar Klum. Zok Gemara like Kasha can be Yosy Chama, can be Yosy Chama. So Rashi explains in the long Rashi that in the summer, where our days are longer, then the sun comes up. The sun comes up in the east, but it comes up on the north side of the east, and that makes sense because in the summer the northern hemisphere is closer to the sun, so the sun comes up early in the morning when we have longer days. It comes up on the north side of the east horizon, and it goes as it crosses from the east horizon to the left horizon. And of course, the sun doesn't cross anything. It's our Earth turning on its axis. But from our perspective, it looks like the sun is moving across the horizon. So the sun moves across the horizon to the south. So it starts off in the northeast corner of our horizon. It heads to the south, and then it goes all the way around to the western horizon, and then it goes all the way up the western horizon, and it sets to the west, but in the north of the western horizon. In the winter, the sun sets at the south part. The sun rises at the south part of the eastern horizon, and it sets at the south part of the western horizon. And during the equinox, the sun comes up in the middle and goes down in the middle. So that's how it works. So therefore, based on that, it makes perfect sense to say, I'm going to want to get to the part of the Rashi where Rashi fears us. So I'm going to be nimtzas. Towards the end of the long Rashi, probably 2/3 down in the long Rashi, nimtzas, it comes out. Yosy Chama, good morning. Yosy Chama, in the summer, Malechas Roy V'Ruach Maravis Lefnei Shkuasa Upam Kula. The sun, since it's a long summer day, the sun, before it sets, goes all the way up the western horizon. And on the really longest days of the summer, Upamim Kula, it goes up the entire western horizon, and it only sets when it's at the top of the western horizon. But in the winter, in the winter, where the sun sets, because it's a much shorter day, the sun sets earlier, it'll set at the south part of the western horizon. But the halavana, the moon, is always constant. When the new moon comes out, we'll always find it at the south side of the western horizon. Therefore, in the winter, where the sun doesn't go to the western horizon only when it sets, because it sets right when it hits the western horizon, halavana koidemes l'soichamayr. Then the moon would be there in the Ma'ariv even before the sun is. Nimtis levana b'tzofan. So the levana we'll always see at the south part of the western horizon, but in the dead of winter, the sun sets at the lowest point in the western horizon. So the moon will appear to be to the north. The moon will appear to be to the north of the sun when the sun sets. But it'll be a Yosy Chama. But in the summer, where the sun doesn't set when it hits the western horizon, the sun climbs all the way up to the north part of the western horizon. The moon is fixed at the south part of the western horizon. It'll be Yosy Chama. Shachama ben Meir. I'm towards the end of the long Rashi. It'll be Yosy Chama. Shachama ben Meir. In the summer, where the sun is in the Ma'ariv Harbe, it spends a lot of time on the western horizon because it climbs all the way up. Most of the summer months, the sun, when it sets towards the end of the day, will be towards the north part of the western horizon, but the moon is fixed at the south part of the western horizon, nimtus levana b'dar. So going back to the steer and brises, we have one brisa that says that when you're looking at the new moon, that's at the western horizon, at the south part of the western horizon, if you see the moon is below the sun, so the sun is to the north of the moon, and if you saw that in the winter, it would be problematic. It wouldn't be right. But if you saw it in the summer, it would make sense. Why? Because in the summer, the sun sets at the northern part of the western horizon. So it makes sense that you would have found the moon below it. But in the winter, if you said that you saw the sun to the north of the moon, then that's for sure incorrect. Because in the winter, the sun always sets on the western horizon at the south corner of the western horizon. So the moon would have been seen above it. So let's go back to the Brisa. We're at the second line of the Gemara. If you claim that the moon was to the north of the sun, you're believed. But if you say the moon was to the south of the sun, you're not believed. So the Gemara explains, when you said that the moon is to the north of the sun, you're believed, that would be in the winter. When you said that the moon was to the north of the sun, you're not believed, that would be in the summer. And in fact, the other branch says, if you say you found the moon to the south of the sun, you're believed in the summer. But let's find out if you found the moon to the north of the sun, that will be in the winter. That's the Gemara's territory. Kasher can be Moishachama, can be Moishacham. So to summarize, in the winter, it's typical to see the moon north of the sun. Of course, they're all on the western horizon, but the moon would be found north of where the sun sets. And in the summer, you would normally see the moon south of where the sun sets. And therefore, depending on what the season is, what you say would be accurate or inaccurate. Tanu Rabban. Now we're talking about your perspective of how high off the horizon the moon was. So really, it's thousands of miles. But when you're looking, you can hold up a pencil and you can say, oh, it's about a pencil high, right? So that's what they're doing here. Tanurban, Echad Omer Gavoya Beis Mardois, the Echad Omer Gimel. If one said it was the length of 2 cattle prods, and the other one said it was the length of 3 cattle prods, there's not such a huge discrepancy, and we'll say one just had a different type of assessment. But Echad Omer Gimel, Echad Omer Hey, which means there's a discrepancy of 2, then they do some betela. Why is that? Because there's too much of a discrepancy in between their 2 visions. These don't become pasal edim. We don't say that they're liars. They had a different assessment, and therefore, if either one of these could find another aid in Bezdin that has a parallel testimony, they would be mitzvah. It's not considered edus that were hukchash. Tanu Rabban. What happens if we said ra'inuhu b'mayim? We didn't see the moon, but we were looking across the lake, and we saw a reflection of the moon in the water. Or ra'inu ba'asas, we saw it in a glass. Or ra'inu ba'abim, we saw it behind clouds. That would not be a good testimony. Now, this ba'ashashes is a very serious issue. Rashi says what it means is kandila balaz. It means like a lantern. So basically, you're seeing it through a glass. Because of this, there's a huge shaila if seeing something through a glass is considered a proper re'iyah. And this is very relevant because someone who wears glasses, can he say eidos? He didn't see it clearly. There's a glass on the way. Can you say Kiddush Levana with glasses on? Can you say Kiddush Levana inside your house looking outside through a glass window? The Chaim Tzvi is chuckling with the cup. What do you mean?
I remember somebody told me you can't be inside when you do Kiddush Levana. You have to go outside because of the glass window. I just wasn't enough.
So what about your glasses?
Yeah, I didn't think of that. A lantern is something that produces light.
Right.
So it would be easy to mistake the light that the lantern itself is producing.
I don't know if it means. I don't think it means a lantern that it's actually on fire. I think.
No, it's fine, but you could mistake that the lantern is on fire.
But what if I had a lantern that was not lit and I saw the moon through?
How do you know it's not lit? Maybe you saw the.
Maybe it was lit. Not.
It was lit. And you saw yourself.
I hear. But most of the Mepharshim learned that.
What did the Gemara say about the lantern?
Well, the Hashashish is a lantern. I think.
Hashana.
The Ashoshes, if you look at Rashi touches Ashoshes as candila. So I'm not sure what a candila is. So we're assuming, so lantirna, a lantern. Kufsa, a box, im doifens chuches, with a glass wall, a suyal nichban there. But the problem here is that the glass distorts the vision. Now, most of the poskim hold that a vada, an aid, or a dayan that wears glasses it's nemen. He's believed and it's considered seen. So most people learn associates is something that maybe isn't. It doesn't clearly. It's not like a glass that you can see clearly through it. It's maybe translucent, but it's not completely clear, or it somewhat distorts the image. If you hold up a glass jar and you look through it, you don't see a clear image like you would see if you're wearing eyeglasses. I'm sorry?
He describes it like a square box or something like
right.
That.
But the walls are made out of glass.
Right.
So you're looking through two. So you're sort of looking through two glasses. So you don't have it's not as a clear vision as you would have when you're looking at a lens. However, the minig is not to say Kiddush Levana through a window. However, someone who is confined to his bed, he can't leave, someone who's in the hospital, Avad and a post can say he could say Kiddush Levana even looking through a window.
So if there's a tzaddik that comes up to the Beshefer and the Beshefer says, why did you look at all the things that you're not supposed to look at? He says, no, I always was mocked at the wear glasses.
I hear. Okay. Zok to Gemara. You don't say, but what about what if I saw half of the moon in the water, or half of the moon in clouds, or half of the moon bashoshes? Ein me'idin alav, they can't say it. Fact Gemara, I don't understand. What's the chiddush? Hashta kula amrit loy. If you saw the whole moon in this fashion, it's not considered seeing it. You can't say testimony that you saw the moon. So if you only saw half, it should be even worse. This is the chiddush in the Braisa. If he said I looked across the lake and I saw the top half of the moon above the horizon clearly, and the bottom half of the moon I didn't really see. I saw the reflection of the moon. Or I saw the moon sticking out behind the clouds. So half of it was behind the clouds, and half of it wasn't. Or they're in the So even if you saw half of it clearly, but the other half was somewhat distorted, that's not good for Eidos. Tanu Rabban, what if we say we saw it, and then and later on we didn't see it anymore? They cannot say testimony that they saw it. That doesn't make any sense. Are you telling me that any aid that comes to Bezdin to say Eidos that he saw, he can't lose sight? It's like a police who catches you speeding. From the moment he catches you speeding, he's not allowed to lose sight of your vehicle even for a second, because then you could say it was a different vehicle, right? So the cop has to say testimony. If you fight a speeding ticket, the cop has to say testimony that even though the car zipped by and I clocked him on my radar, I didn't lose eye contact with that car the entire time until I stopped it. Otherwise, say I'm the car that you clocked. So is that how it works with the Eidos on the moon? You have to see it the whole time. This is what it means to say. We were walking and we were strolling and we weren't looking to the moon. We're inu me'eleinu, and someone, hey, look, is that the moon? And then we said, hey, let's focus to look to make sure that we see the moon. So then we turned to focus to look at the moon. Then we want to look and focus. Then we were no longer able to see it. So in such a case, because they never saw it when they were focusing to see it. They just noticed it in passing. My timer. Why do we say that that's not considered a good sighting? Because Amar Kuvisa de Iba Ba'amu Dechaz. Maybe they didn't really see the moon. Maybe they saw the shape of a round cloud and it looked to them like the moon. But once they looked more closely to analyze it, they realized that it wasn't. Therefore, such a vision is not considered seeing the moon. Welcome. Good morning, Eddie. Good morning, David. David made it. Baruch Hashem. Zok to Gemara Vayter. So now we're up to the next Mishnah. Very nice Mishnah. Rosh Bezdin Amar Mekudesh. Once the Bezdin accepts the Eidos of the Edom, he says Mekudesh. The Chol Ha'am Onion Acharav, and everybody answers after him Mekudesh Mekudesh. So the Gemara is going to discuss why they say Mekudesh, Mekudesh. The Berditcheva says that the Rebbeinu Shalom has 3 crowns of Kedusha, of which he keeps one for himself, and 2 of them he gives the Klal Yisrael. So all 3 crowns have to be included in the announcing of the Chodesh of Mekudesh. So he says over here, that we say over here, Kaddish B'Shmei Meroima, that's the crown that Rebbeinu keeps. Then there's Kaddish al Ara Oived Gevurte, and then there's Kaddish La'olam L'Olmei Maya. So our Mekudesh that we announce are representing the 2nd and the 3rd crowns that Rebbeinu Shalom gave into the world. So it says over here, Say if the moon was seen on day 30, where it needs a proclamation of Rosh Chodesh, because maybe Rosh Chodesh is the next day, so they need to proclaim that today is Rosh Chodesh. Or even if the moon was not sighted on the 30, rather it was only on day 31 that they made Rosh Chodesh, which by default has to be Rosh Chodesh anyway, because it can't be later than that. Still, they still proclaim Mekudesh. If Rosh Chodesh ends up being on day 31, which is the default, where it would have to be Rosh Chodesh no matter what, you don't have to proclaim Mekudesh. You know why? By the fact that the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't reveal the moon to us on day 30, that's the Rebbeinu Shalom telling us that the Rosh Chodesh is on day 31, and therefore we don't need Bezdin to proclaim that. The Rebbeinu Shalom already proclaimed. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Rosh Bezdin.
One second, don't we, Yosy, I understand, when Shabbos comes and Yontif, we have to make Mekudesh it even though the Rebbeinu Shalom brought it in, right?
We don't have to proclaim Mekudesh. We don't have to proclaim it.
Well, isn't there a mitzvah of being Mekadesh the Yain?
Well, I don't know if making Kiddush brings the Kedusha, especially by Shabbos.
No, even if you don't make Kiddush, but isn't there a separate mitzvah to be Mekadesh the Yain?
Yeah, but that's what Kshus Nakia, but it's not, there's no mitzvah to proclaim it. There's a mitzvah to respect it and act differently on Shabbos. We don't have to announce, we don't have to proclaim it and say now is Shabbos. Shabbos comes with or without us.
Sure, and
I think Shabbos is only 5 days away.
No, we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago. I remember in the other room before we got thrown out.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see the Gemara over here. Rosh Bezdin. Amar Abchir Bar Gamda, Amar Yosy ben Shol, Amar Rebbe, Amar Kro, Vayidaber Moshe es Mo'adei Hashem. Moshe had to proclaim the Mo'adei Hashem. He can't Rosh Bezdin Omer Mekudesh. He has to proclaim it. He has to proclaim it as having Kedusha. Okay, Zok to Gehelik the Gemara Paiter. The Chola Onion Achav Mekudesh. Everybody has to answer Mekudesh. That's even a bigger chiddush. Minalog, where do you know this from? Omer Apap Omer Kra. It says Elam Hayad Hashem Kra. Kodesh is one of our favorite psukim because we usually say this pasuk right before the L'chaim. So it's a pasuk that heralds a happy moment. That was Moshe Ribna's part. That's right. It says Asher Tikru Oisam Kari Bey Atem. So if you make Kiddush enough times, instead of saying Asher Tikru Oisam B'Moyadam, you're going to say Asher Tikru Atem. Hashem is telling us that you, Atem, you have to announce Mekudesh. You have to make these Kodesh. Rav Nachman ben Yitzchak Amar, Eilahem Mayadei. These are my Mayadim. Heim Yoimru, they should say, Klal Yisrael should say, Mayadei Mekudesh. Heim Yoimru, they should proclaim. Why twice? Mekudesh, Trei Zimni Lamali. The more to say Mikra'ei Kodesh. There, it's plural. It's not Mikra Kodesh. It's Mikra'ei Kodesh to tell us that we have to twice pronounce it as Kodesh. Mikra'ei Kodesh, Rashi says, Trei Zimni Mashma. It's Mashma that we have to make 2 announcements. So the B'ditcheva gives us a little bit of insight as to why. It's because of the 2 crowns of Kedusha that are by Klal Yisrael. If anyway, Rosh Chodesh is day 31, So then it's automatically kodesh. We don't need bezin to be mekadosh. Tanya, we learned Kalima Yomer. Kalima was a Tana. Bismanoi ein mekadosh. He says exactly the opposite. If Rosh Chodesh falls out on day 30, then they don't have to say mekadosh. But shaloi bismanoi. But if it was on day 31, then bedafka you need to be mekadosh. Mekadosh. Okay, let's see if Rashi speaks on it. No, so the Gemara is going to explain why that is. No matter when Rosh Chodesh is, whether it's on day 30 or day 31, you don't have to be mekadosh. Shneimar says in the pasuk, we don't have to be mekadosh chadashim. The Torah only refers to being mekadosh years, like the year of Yovel. It says v'chidashtem eshnas hachamisha. The only time you see the Torah explicitly states that you need to be mekadosh something actively is by Yovel. Shonim atam mekadosh. There's only a mitzvah to be mekadosh years. Be atam mekadosh chadashim. There's never a reason to proclaim the kedusha on a month. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mishmul. Rabbi Yehuda Mishmul said, "Halacha Rabbi Elazar bat Tzaddik." Halacha is like Rabbi Elazar bat Tzaddik, and Rabbi Elazar bat Tzaddik in our Mishnah told us that day 30 they have to be mekadosh the chodesh. Bezin has to proclaim it, but for day 31, Bezin doesn't have to proclaim it. Amar Abai Avanan Amitinina. We learned a brayso as well to support this halacha. Ra'u Bezin v'chol Yisrael. What if Bezin and all of Klal Yisrael saw the moon? Meaning it was a big, clear night, big bright moon. So the halacha is nechru edim. What happens if this happened towards the end of day 30? So everybody saw the moon, and two edim quickly come to Bezdin to go through the hakir process. But they didn't have an opportunity to finish up and to declare Rosh Chodesh on day 30 until it was too late. It was already night. The halacha is I raise them over. The Chodesh is considered mu'uber, meaning Rosh Chodesh is not on day 30. They missed the deadline. Rosh Chodesh will be on day 31. So we're medayik from the brayso that says mu'uber. It's mashma that they don't have to be mekadosh. It's automatically mu'uber. Mu'uberin mekudesh loy. It doesn't say that they have to be mekadosh. So you have a raya that if it's on day 31, you don't have to be mekadosh. It's automatically mu'uber. That's more loy. That's not the case at all. Really, they have to be mekadosh. So why did the brayso use the word mu'uber? It's to tell you a different chiddush. Mu'uber is trichalei. So kadai chamina. You might have thought falsely that a hoyel beru bezin b'chol Yisrael, since everybody saw the moon on day 30, so it was clear to everybody that the new moon was already there on day 30. If arsima, it's before some everybody knows v'loy lavru, and it would be incorrect for Bezdin to make Rosh Chodesh the next day. It looks like a sheker because everyone knows the moon was already there on the first day. Kamash malon, since they have to be mekadosh it, and they didn't have a chance to be mekadosh it until day 31, then that's the day of Rosh Chodesh. Let's see Rashi. So I never explained Plimai. Plimai said the opposite. He said if it's on day 30, you don't need to be mekadosh. But on day 31, you need to be mekadosh. Why is that? If it's bismanei ein mekadosh noisoi, sheini tzarech chizuk. It doesn't need chizuk. If it's on day 30, but if it's on day 31, then it needs chizuk. I'm not sure clear what that means yet. Let's see Rashi. It's mashma that at night it became nizaber. It doesn't say that they have to pronounce it as being makudish. So the Gemara wanted to bring a raya from here that on day 31 they don't have to be mekadosh the chodesh, like Rabbi Elazar said. The Gemara said it's not a raya. Really, from the brayso you don't have a raya that on day 31 doesn't need kiddush. Maybe it does. I'd like Tanya. The reason why the brayso said mu'uber and didn't say you have to be mekadosh it is been shown this mu'uber. The focus of the Tana is to tell us that Rosh Chodesh will actually be on day 31. Why is that important? Since everybody saw the moon on day 30, so there would have been a havamina that the Bezdin shouldn't make Rosh Chodesh on day 31 because everybody saw the moon on day 30. If the Tana would have said I raise a miskadosh l'mocher, havamina la'olam miyoy mekama v'sakdinu. If it would have just said mekudesh l'mocher, you would have thought that they announced mekudesh, but they're referring to yesterday, and the mekudesh that they're doing is saying that yesterday was Rosh Chodesh. Kamash v'lon, that's why it says uber to tell us on day 31. So let me remember what Plimai said. So Plimai said that the only time you need to be mekadosh if it's shaloi bismana. And Rashi says because if it's bismana, it doesn't need chizuk. But since it's being pushed off a day, then we need to tell everybody that it was pushed off a day. Okay. Let me see the Halakha Gemara Vayter. When the Edom came, not everyone had clarity in everything. So because of that, Rabbi Gamliel was trying to make it easy for him to question the Edom as to what they saw. Because of that, the mus surois levana hoyloi Rabbi Gamliel b'tap uvekoisel bal Yosy. So Rabbi Gamliel had an attic where he interviewed the Edom as the head of the Bezdin, and he had pictures on the wall and on boards of different configurations of the moon and the sun. Shebehen Maris had yotes for those who weren't experts in understanding these things. He was able to show them different models to ask them what it is that they saw. And he would ask, did you see this or did you see that? If they weren't able to articulate and explain what they saw, he was able to give them examples so that they can pick. It's like a criminal lineup. Do you recognize a criminal, which one it was? So if he shows them the different models, they'll be able to remember what they saw. Correct the Gemara. Umishari, is that mutter to have the musim of the moon, of the sun, of things in the Shemayim? And we learn from that passage, you should not make any models that are like the things that are meshamishmi, referring to the celestial beings. So let's have a look. Let's have a look at the psukim inside where it says L'Sasaniti. I'm trying to find my psukim. Oh, here it is. L'Sasaniti. This is in Yisroi. L'Sasaniti Elahei Chesed Elahei L'Sas Lochem. So from the L'Sasaniti we learn don't make anything of the beings and the creations that are sort of near me. The sun, the moon, the stars. So Zakta Gemara, Amar Abai, it's not shver. Like Asher Torah, Abai is going to tell us three important halachas today. So the first important halacha he tells us is like Asher Torah, and Lashamashin she'afshir lasos k'mois. The only type of things that you're not allowed to make are things that it's possible to make. Nobody could ever make a sun. Nobody could ever make a moon. No one can make stars. Those things you're allowed to make because no one's going to think that's avodah zarah. But to make things that a human could make, that's prohibited if it's similar to what the Rebbeinu Shalom has. Kiditanya, layas adam bayis tavnus heichal. A person shouldn't build a house that looks like the heichal. That's something that we could build. Or achsadra, an open entranceway, tavnus ulam, that would look like the ulam of the base of Mikdash. Or chatzar, he shouldn't make himself a yard, keneged azara, that looks like the azara. Or shulchan, or a table, keneged shulchan, that looks like a shulchan. Or a menorah that looks like the menorah. Aval, what you are allowed to do is, oiseh shel chamisha v'shel shisha, you could make a menorah that has 5 arms or 6 arms, v'shel shmoina, or of 8 arms, but v'shel shiva layasa, but you shouldn't make a menorah with 7 arms because that's identical to what was in the base of Mikdash. And you're not allowed to make a menorah of 7 arms, afilu shel shar minei matchas. Not only if it's made out of gold, but even if it's made out of any other metal, you're not allowed to. And Rashi tells us why. On the second line of Rashi, because menorahs of other metals will also be kosher. In the Tanya, menorahs, klal, zovtar prat, mishat yaz chaz v'kol. Ma prat before shal matchas, avkol shal matchas. So every metal is allowed. If you're not even allowed to make a menorah of wood, because a menorah of wood is also allowed. And Rashi tells us if you dash in miyut, riboy, miyut, or riboy, miyut, riboy, then wood would also be allowed. The only thing that wouldn't be allowed is a miyasa thing like cheres. So wood would be allowed. And Rabbi Breitman says, as a matter of fact, the first menorah that the Malcha Beis Chashmonai, who didn't have money, they actually made a wooden menorah. So you see clearly a wooden menorah is allowed in the base of Mikdash. Therefore, you shouldn't be allowed to make it private. Amr Loi, they told him, you're wrong. There was never a wooden menorah in the base of Mikdash. Misham Raya from the Machi Beis Chashmono, you have a right that only metal is mutter, because Shvudin Shel Barzel Hayu, the core of the menorah, the frame of that menorah, was made out of metal. The Chivim Bavats, they covered it with a nice looking wood, so that it should look nice. But it wasn't really a wood menorah; it was really a metal menorah. Heshiru, once the second Beis Hamikdash was continuing after the Beis Chashmono, and they started to do better, Ashum Shal Kesef, they upgraded the menorah and they made it in silver. Chazu ve'ashiru, they became wealthier. Asum Shal Zav, once again they upgraded the menorah. So you see from here that the only things that you're not allowed to make are things that a man could make. But a model of a sun, a model of a moon, Zok Abaye is not a problem. Therefore, it's no problem that Rabbi Gamliel had that. Is that true? So the Gemara is challenging Abaye. Are you actually telling me that a sun and the moon you're allowed to make because no one would even think that a human could make such a thing? But Tanya, we learned, Loi Sasum Iti, the Brisa Darshan, Loi Sasum Kitmush Shimshai, Hameshamshim, Lefanai Bamaran. Don't make anything that looks like my Shamasim, who are Meshamish me up in the heavens. Clearly, nothing that's up in the heavens a human can make. So you see that Abaye is kind of, that something that a human can't make would be mutter. You see here that it's also. Amar Abaye is Abaye, no, that's not what it means. So this is the second important halacha that Abaye is telling us. Right?
I have to cancel my order. You talk like Abaye that we.
Well, let's finish. Let's finish. You don't have to cancel your order. Let's finish. Let's finish what it says. Amar Abaye lo yosfer Torah el demus arba ponim bahadi adodim. The Mishamshim Lefanei Bamarim isn't referring to the sun and the moon. It's referring to the Ma'aseh Merkava, the four partsufim that are by the Kisei HaKavod. That's what it's referring to. For the Gemara Elamai Ata, if it has to be only Arba Ponim, which is the structure of the Kisei HaKavod, so parts of Adam L'chudei Tishtri. So if it's only the face of a person, which is not all four parts of together, that should be mutter. Because Abaye is saying, only if you have all four together. I think it's a lion and it's an eagle and it's a shore, I think, and a human. So you're telling me that the parts of Adam alone would be allowed? Aloma Tanya. Why did we learn the Brisa that says, Kol apartufos mutarin, any face is going to be allowed to make, chutz min parts of Adam. You see, the parts of an Adam by itself is not allowed to be made. Amar Rabbi Chuna Baredi Rav Idi Mipirkei da Abaye, from Abaye's teretz Shmieli, I learned the following: that Leisasan Iti is taich Leisasan Ois. Don't make me, meaning Kavayochel, like the parts of an Adam. So Leisasan Iti says all four parts of them together are not allowed, but the one part of a person is also not allowed. So you might ask me, once the one part of a person is not allowed, why do I need halacha that the four parts of them are allowed? In order to make the four parts of the Kisei HaKavod, one of them is human. So why do I need that halacha? Because we're already saying a human cannot be made. That's Tosfos' kasha. Tosfos' kasha is over here. Lo sasun iti. So I'm on the third Tosfos of it. Tosfos asking Tamer, Umayka Amar Elo Demus Arba Ponim. Why is Abaye saying it's only usher if I have all four ponim? That's where it becomes usher. Abaye also says that even the human face cannot be made. So that's enough to usher all four because one of them is human. You need both halachas because ki ika shar partzufim im adam sharitvei. You might have thought that an adam alone that's not allowed to be made. But maybe if there's other partzufim with it, that would be better. Kamash Malon, all four cannot be made. That's one Svar Tosfos says. Inami imata turas adam. If you found a turas adam, osur lahashlim l'dal panim. Even if you found a turas panim, you're not allowed to add anyone to it because that makes it worse. So there's different Svaras as to why you need both halachos. So once again, so Abaye tells us that you're only not allowed to make things that are doimit to the things that we could make, like things in the Beis Hamikdash. You're not allowed to make all four partsufim. And you're not allowed to make the parts of a human. Okay? But you're still allowed to make sun and moon and stars. So Chaim, you're still in the clear, right? So tomorrow, B'shar Shemoshim, Mishari, are other Shemoshim allowed? In other words, we're challenging Abai again. Are you sure you're allowed to make the sun and the moon? But Tanya, we learned, Loi Sasan Iti, Loi Sasan Kemush Shimshai, Hameshamshim Lefonai B'Morib. You're not allowed to make things that are similar to those things that are Meshamishmi B'Morib. And now the Brisa gets specific. So these are things that are not on the Kisei HaKavod that are also not allowed. So maybe the sun and the moon shouldn't be allowed either. In the highest level, Rashi says, should be in the seventh heaven, right near the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's the things that cannot be made. Those malachim, the daikinin iti, were iti that are closest to me. Avochama, ulavana, the techavim, umazalois, the mother attacked. They're only in the second heaven, so therefore those are still allowed. The mother attacked me. Sorry, the Gemara is coming out of Abaye. Even the mother attacked, who said it should be allowed? But Tanya, it says in the pasuk, Asher b'shamayim l'rabos chama ulavana techavim umazalois. That's what it means. Asher b'shamayim mimal is l'rabos malachei ashoris. So here it says clearly that you're not allowed to make even the sun and the moon. So how could you be allowed to buy it? The stars, constellations.
No, that's the home.
No, constellations.
Oh, okay. Groups of stars?
So to Gemara, but you could ask the same constellation. If you can't make stars, you for sure can't make constellations. Because constellations are made out of stars. Yes, I'm not sure.
Use the shapes.
Planets?
Yeah.
Planets? Those are not planets?
So Zok to Gemara, he Tanya he. The only time it's usher to make the sun and the moon is if you're making it la'avdam. If you're making it as an avodah zarah. If you're not making it as an avodah zarah, then you're allowed to make it. Correct to Gemara, if you're making it because you want to make it as an avodah zarah, ila avdam, forget all these things in the list. Afil shil shel katanami, even a tiny little worm, you're not allowed to make if you're making it with the intent of serving it as an avodah zarah. So you're right about that. The Tanya Asher Ba'aretz, if you go by to dash in this pasuk more, we also add to it l'rabbis harim ugavoyos yamim unaharos afikim the gayos afikim are moitzoy mayim. Rashi says they're springs. Mitachas l'rabbis shil shil kub. So for an avodah zarah, you're not allowed to make anything. But at this point, not for avodah zarah, you'd be allowed to make the sun, the moon, and the stars. So I just want to stop for a second, and I want to go back to the Demus Adam. Everybody holds, Abai holds, you're not allowed to make a Demus Adam. So the question is, are you allowed to make dolls? Are you allowed to have dolls? So that's a big child amongst the poskim. There are those who hold you're not allowed to make dolls, but you're allowed to have dolls. Most people have dolls. But there are those who mangle and mutilate their dolls because they're makbid that it's a Demus Adam. So this is actually a shaila in the poskim, and you have to ask your local rabbi what he holds. Okay? Zok the Heilige Gemara. So once again, we're attacking Abai. Abai said that you're only not allowed to make sun and the moon if you're doing it for avodah zarah. But if you're making it not for avodah zarah, you're allowed to. Is that so? I'm going to prove not. But Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. Loi sasun iti, and we learned from the Brisa. The Brisa learns from the pasuk. Loi sasun kidmush shimshai hameshamshim lefanai k'lein chama u'levana k'chavim u'mazalos. So once again, we have an attack on Abai. Zok to Gemara, you're right. A regular person is not allowed to make these things. She's getting uncomfortable again. Zok to Gemara, shiny Rabbi Gamliel, the acherim also. Rabbi Gamliel is different. He didn't make them. A goy made them for him. Somebody else made them for him.
Check now that your globe thing is made in China. You don't
In fact, Gemara, where Rabbi Yehuda, the acherim also. There was a story with Rabbi Yehuda where others made it for him, and it was still a problem. What was the story? Rabbi Yehuda, Shinina, sharp one. And there's a shaila why Rabbi Yehuda was considered a sharp one, either because he was very sharp in learning, or there are those who learned because he had sharp teeth. And what Shmuel said is, Samei Eine Dedain. Destroy the chaysim. So Rabbi Yehuda had a chaysim that someone else made for him. And let's see Rashi, Rabbi Yehuda. He had a form in his ring, in his signet ring. He didn't make it, others made it for him. And nevertheless, you got to get rid of it. Sama literally means to blind, but it doesn't really mean to blind. It means hashchis tzurasai. You got to ruin it. So why over there was it a problem if you Abai are saying that Rabbi Gamaliel didn't make it, he just acquired it? So Gemara Hasam Chais my Bailatap. There, the Chaisim stuck out. It wasn't concave, it was convex, it stuck out. So it was three-dimensional. That's a problem because someone will be Chaishim, if he carried that around on his ring, someone might be Chaishim that he has a little getchka. If it's concave, then there's no getchka. It's not three-dimensional. It's just scratched out. But if it sticks up, it's like a little getchka, like a bus. Correct. In Tanya we learned, Tabas Chais my boile. If your Chaisim sticks out, you're not allowed to wear it, but you're allowed to make a stamp with it because your stamp is going to end up being concave. But if your ring is kosher because it's not boiled, you're allowed to wear it, but you're not allowed to use it because what you're going to make when you stamp it is going to be boiled. Correct the Gemara. Are you choshed whenever you see someone having like a ring like that or any other type of form? Are you automatically choshed that he's doing about the Zorah? There was a shul, and it was in a city called Shaf Yosy. It was in the city called Shaf Yosy. Let's see Rashi. Rashi has two pshatim as to where this name came from. So Rashi says, Makamu, either at Shaf Yosy, it was a city in the Hardah, but the Yesh Paisrin, it was Shecharav V'chazav and Nivna. It was a shul that was destroyed and they got rebuilt again. The Tamid Haisa Shechina Metuyasham. And the Shechina was always there. What was special about the shul? Rashi says something fascinating. Yechanya v'galusai banu. Yechanya, when he was exiled from Yerushalayim to Bavel, he built this shul. So why was it called Shaf Yosef? Because Shanasu Imayen me Avne Yerushalayim. They took stones from the stones of Yerushalayim, so it was taken apart and it was going to get brought back. Now this is referring to the stones of the Beis Hamikdash. So the Mefarshim discuss Rashi, how could you take stones from the Beis Hamikdash and use them in your shul? So they answer that we actually learned this, that once the Goyim came and were mechalel the Beis Hamikdash, it lost its kedusha. And in fact, they were allowed to use those stones, but I think that they were going to bring them back when the Beis Hamikdash was going to be rebuilt. If I'm not mistaken, when we took the tour of the Bells of Besmedrash, they said that the Bells of Besmedrash was a duplicate of the Bells of Besmedrash in Bells, right? And in Bells, Al Piruach HaKodesh, the Bells Rebbe said that you can draw a direct line from this Besmedrash to the Makam Kodesh HaKodeshim, and there'll be no churches in the way. They did the same moifus when they built the Bells of Besmedrash in Yerushalayim. They just used the GPS and Google Earth to make sure that there's a direct line to the Makam Beis HaKodeshim.
I can't remember who heard the story. I heard it recently. Was the guy who had a businessman who had a customer list. I don't know if that was even true. He asked him if he could bring it to Israel, if he could bring back a piece of the Wailing Wall, right? And the guy, no, said like, Rosh, let's put this for music.
Right.
So he went and took like a knife or a fork, and chiseled out
a piece of the kozel. Oh my!
Right? And everything went south for the guy and for the recipient. Really bad, very quickly. And that's what they
attributed it to. Wow.
Before you know, there'll be no place in it.
But I'll call upon him. It's like the Panasabim. But I'll call upon him. If I'm not mistaken, the Belt of Besmedrash was built originally. They got up in some stones or some glass that came from the Beis Hamikdash that they built into the Belt of Besmedrash. That's that's the story that they said. That in Europe they got up stones or some glass, or they had something that were from the Beis Hamikdash. They claim. I don't know. Anyway, so what happened was in this shul had a feature. They have a bay andarta. It had an andarta. What's an andarta? Rashi says, Selim the Musamela. It had a statue of the king of Babel, I guess. And nevertheless, Bava Ali, Rabbi Shmuel, Bavuda Shmuel, the Levi, and all these illustrious Choshev Eden daven there. And there was no chash that people would think that they're going to do avodah zarah. So what was the problem with this ring? If you're not choshed, the tomorrow rabbim shiny, an individual who has something like this, there's a makam chashad. But if it's a besmedrish and there's a rabbim, no one's choshed, the rabbim is going to do avodah zarah. Correct, Gemara, Rabbi Gamliel Yochid. Rabbi Gamliel was a Yochid. So if he's a Yochid, how is he allowed to have these forms? Dr. Gemara. Now, Chaim Tzvi mentioned a moment ago, Rabbi Gamliel, his images were concave, right? So if his images were concave, there is no Makam Chashad, right? Didn't you mention that earlier? So let's look at the second wide line of places. For Rabbi Gamliel Yochid Tema, but Tzud Rabbi Gamliel Lo Yosy Beletes. So shouldn't there be a problem of chashad anyway? There's still a makom chashad. The gab levana ein chiluk even the ein beilatis berakia. The gab the moon, it's not a chiluk because the moon even berakia doesn't stick out. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Maybe the moon is also concave because it looks like a banana. So memela, that there would be a problem with chashad for the moon and Rabbi Gamliel's surahs were of the moon. But Dr. Gemara, Rabbi Gamliel Yochadu, so how was he allowed to have it? So Gemara, first of all, keeping the Nasihu Shchichi Rabbim Gaben. Since he was a Nasi, his place was a Rishus Rabbim, people were in and out. Or Ibai Sema, the Prokamava, it was made out of pieces. So since it was made out of pieces, it didn't look like the Tzura that would be in the Zara. Ibai Sema, there was a very good reason why he had it. He needed to teach people to understand if they saw the moon properly. Uksiv, it says, like Silmad Lasai. You're not allowed to learn to make these avodah zaras. Rashi's the pasuk's lashon is, it says ki'ata ba el haaretz asher Hashem elokecha noshalach loisilmad lasas k'dei avos hagoyim hein. Don't learn to make like their avodah zaras. So zok the Gemara, that means don't learn to make it for an avodah zara. Aval atalamed lahavenu lahayros. Avada, you're allowed to learn and make these things if it's to teach people Torah, if it's to teach people the Allah, and therefore Rabbi Gamliel was allowed to have these things. So now that we saw all this, Chaim Tzvi Pashtus, there shouldn't be a problem with you ordering those things. First of all, you're not making them, and second of all, they're Islamic, right? And it's going to be Barabim, so you're good to go. You don't have to worry about it. Beautiful. So let's stop here. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The guy has $2 million worth of quarters. And the